States across America are still grappling with upticks in COVID-19 cases as President Biden mandates vaccines for millions of Americans nationwide. In West Virginia, an average of 123 new cases are reported each day per 100,000 people. That's the highest rate per day in the nation. This comes as about 1 million students return to in-person learning, as we've been saying, in New York City today. For most of them, it's their first time since March of 2020. The president's renewed push to fight the spread of the coronavirus is seeing resistance from several Republican leaders, though. They're threatening legal action against the administration for what some have called an abuse of federal authority. For more on this, let's bring in Ed O'Keefe, who is standing by for us at the White House. So, Ed, how is the White House responding to some of these challenges, these mandates? They're questioning whether it's within the president's power to implement them, although throughout the course of American history, Ed, as you and I and Anne-Marie have talked about before, ranging from the polio vaccine to measles and mumps and rubella, which children need to have in schools, this is not new.
And you basically just answered the question, Vlad. That's the answer the White House would give. This isn't new. And as the president said last week, bring it to those that are opposed to this or believe that it could somehow get defeated with a legal challenge. They point out that not only has the Supreme Court ruled a handful of times on vaccine policy and the federal government's ability to implement it, that the ruling that he made, or the call he's making for the OSHA agency to put in place mandates for companies that employ 100 people or more are also backed by precedent that has been backed by federal courts. And so ultimately they feel that they're going to prevail. But ultimately, we're going to see legal fights probably from several different states, several different angles, and we will see if ultimately the Supreme Court takes this up. Remember, in a few instances, they've already ruled on pandemic policy by essentially allowing the one that sticks in my mind is the religious exemption that was put in place for churches, basically defeating a New York and a California policy that banned churches from actually holding services. But they have also ruled in other cases by rejecting some cases and saying, look, the federal government or even a state government has the right, due to public health and safety concerns, to be implementing this kind of policy.
So, meantime, President Biden's heading to California today to campaign for the state's embattled governor, Governor Gavin Newsom. He's got a recall election coming up. Tomorrow's the last day to vote. What does the fact that the president is making this trip say about the state of this recall election and, how important it is for the president?
Yeah, and actually, it's one of 4 stops he's making in the West today and tomorrow. And we should point out, this is the westernmost trip he's taken as president so far. Hard to believe it took until September, but given the pandemic, his travel, of course, has been a little more restricted. And we checked here at the White House, and we seem to agree this is his first trip to California since he won the March 2020 Super Tuesday California primary. So it's been a while since he's been out there. And obviously, the biggest Democratic state, one where he had overwhelming support. But he's stopping first, notably in Boise, Idaho today, to visit with federal firefighting authorities that are based in Idaho. Because remember, so many of our Western friends and neighbors in this country have been enduring just a record-setting wildfire season. Most federal wildfire operations are out of California or Idaho. Part of the push that he's made is to revamp wildfire policy and make sure that federally employed firefighters are actually earning more money so that they can retain the personnel needed. So that's actually a really important stop for many in the West that he'll make. Then goes to Sacramento, not to see Governor Newsom, but to tour wildfire damage in that region of the state in Northern California that stretches across parts of California into Nevada as well. Then goes down to Long Beach, California, a notable stop that he will make, not until 7 o'clock tonight Pacific time, 10 in the East. So really, like, as the sun goes down, folks, into election, suddenly the president shows up to help Gavin Newsom. So he's waited until almost the last possible moment to make this appearance, trying to goose Democratic turnout in the last few hours before the polls open. Remember, all Californians who are eligible voters got a ballot in the mail. They can put it in the mail through tomorrow, and they can vote in person tomorrow across the state. Northern California, we're going to get a little history lesson, a political geography lesson here for a second. Northern California, pretty reliable history of voting and voting for Democrats, so no need for the president to go there. Kamala Harris, the vice president, a Bay Area native, was there last week trying to gin up support, making sure people turn in their ballots. By sending the president down to Southern California, though, The governor gets to dominate news coverage across L.A., Orange County, down to San Diego tonight with the message that the president delivers to try to convince those independents and Democrats to vote against the recall and for the governor on the two-question recall ballot and see what they can do. But a risk-averse White House, if for some reason the polls are wrong and the governor doesn't prevail, the president won't have much of this on him since he's showing up here at the last possible moment to help the governor. It will have been mostly about the governor himself and the campaign that that team ran. So important for the president to show up, but we'll see how much of an actual effect it ultimately has. If anything, it's kind of a morale boost for the governor and for Democrats across the state concerned about this.
Ed, it's not, as you know, it's not just President Biden. Former President Obama has put out commercials for Governor Newsom. We've seen Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, throwing their full support behind Governor Newsom. And I know that you know this, that Major Garrett spoke to Larry Elder, who's the Republican challenger, and asked him about President Trump and how he looms large over this election, because you've started to see something really troubling, which is that there are some who are suggesting that if Larry Elder somehow does not prevail, that means that there's something that somehow the election is rigged, to use a word that was thrown around in the last presidential election. I will note that two of the other Republican challengers have suggested that that's crazy, but that is part of what we're seeing there in California, and you've got heavy firepower out there. So how critical is it for Democrats for Governor Newsom to retain that seat?
Well, it's not only critical for him to retain the seat for Democrats, because it would be a huge embarrassment, huge blow to the party to lose the governorship of the nation's largest state and the nation's largest Democratic state. And it would be a huge red flag for Democrats on the ballot going into next year, whose records and whose political life may be measured by how well they responded to the pandemic. So there's a lot of intrigue around this message that the governor's been using in the closing days. Keep me in charge, because while you may not be a huge fan of what I did, at least I am less chaotic, less uncertain to you than what these Trump-style Republicans would like to do, which is to end the mask mandates and end the pandemic policy that we've put in place that has saved potentially millions of Californians. And don't hand things over to Republicans who will make things chaotic. If that sort of passive-aggressively, mostly negative way of campaigning to keep your seat works, it is potentially a default position for a lot of Democrats in tight races next year who could turn around and say, do you really want to hand things over, voters, to this untested Trump-style Republican when we had 4 years of chaos from that president? And look what that did in terms of the pandemic. So a lot of intrigue around that. Notable that in that interview with Major Garrett, I'm sure you guys will play it here at some point throughout the day, he said he batted away the questions about fraud by suggesting, well, I'm going to win by such a huge margin it won't matter. We'll see. But that is the argument that Newsom and Democrats would make. They believe the margin will be big enough that all this talk about fraud or nefarious actions is moot and silly and unnecessary.
We will see. Want to ask you about something else now. Senator Joe Manchin said yesterday that he will not support President Biden's $3.5 trillion plan for social and environmental spending, citing in particular his opposition to a proposed increase in the corporate tax rate. They need every vote they can get. Is the White House confident that Democrats can pass this reconciliation bill, and what comes next in the process?
Publicly, they remain so, Anne-Marie, and I feel like at this point we should have a graphic that's like the Daily Mansion mess or something that we'd stick over here in the corner.
Right.
Just, have it flashing. Because he's going to continue to do this as the debate continues. And if it's not him, it'll be Kirsten Sinema or that group of moderate Democrats in the House who are trying to say to their party and to this White House, slow down. $3.5 trillion over 10 years is a lot of money, and it merits serious, substantive, long debate before we cut such a big check that, again, would be doled out over 10 years, not at one time. So what he was doing yesterday is amplifying this message of, I don't want to spend that much. I want to do closer to $1.2, $1.5 trillion. Bernie Sanders, the budget chairman, who at one time was pushing for as much as $6 trillion in spending, says, we'll get there. We're going to sort this out. But the president's with us. Most Democrats are with us, and we got to sort this and figure out a way to do it. I think what is most certain at this point, Anne-Marie, is the goal of having this done by the end of September is probably going to get tossed out by the end of this week when they acknowledge that it's going to take a little longer, in part because there are a bunch of must-do things that have to get done by the end of the fiscal year, September 30th, including passing a budget to keep the lights on, dealing with the debt ceiling. Those two housekeeping things are going to dominate a lot of time when they all get back. Then they can turn back to this potentially $3.5 trillion social and climate legislation that they're trying to get done. So if anything, it's a sign that the pause that Manchin has been calling for is at least going to cause a little more of a slow roll. That shouldn't surprise people because, as Manchin rightly points out, there's no hard and fast deadline tied to this legislation. This is an aspirational push for lots of big social and economic changes in this country. So let's just take the time to get it done and not rush it through. We'll see. It's an important part of the conversation. It's mostly on process. But I think it's also ultimately an understanding by some of these Democrats that if we don't demonstrate we were talking this through and being responsible about it, we could all suffer in the elections next year.
Meanwhile, Ed, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to face some aggressive questioning from lawmakers today. He will testify before the House Foreign Affairs Committee about the U.S.'s withdrawal from Afghanistan. What are we expecting?
Well, we're expecting he's going to get a lot of questions on questions we've had ever since it happened. How many Americans still remain? How can they get out of that country if they want to? What's the status of our relationship with the Taliban? What's our status of recognizing them potentially as a legitimate government, or will the Biden administration have a policy of not doing so? What happened, by the way, with that drone strike that happened the Sunday before the withdrawal that two reports over the weekend showed may not have actually involved an ISIS militant, but may have actually just killed innocent civilians? Blinken, as Secretary of State, won't answer those questions, saying you got to talk to the Pentagon about it. But they're examples of the kind of public oversight now that Congress is quite eager to carry out to demonstrate their concern about how this went. The President said it over the weekend. The majority of Americans, and he's right, the majority of Americans support ending the conflict in Afghanistan, but took great issue with the mechanics of the withdrawal. He's going to get some of that today in the House. He'll get it in the Senate tomorrow. But keep in mind, both of these hearings are virtual. Like so many other meetings we've had ourselves over the last 18 plus months, it means that some of the body language, some of the conversation between those involved is going to be stilted and limited in its virtual scope. So he may get away with not having to answer as many difficult questions as he might ultimately do face-to-face. But we should start to see the administration answer for some of this, at least in a public setting.
All right, Ed, thank you very much. Covered a lot of bases there. Thank you.
Just for you guys. Take care.